Incredible discovery! Abandoned elderly couple uncovers hidden tunnel that changed their lives forever. George and Helen, a beloved elderly couple, slowly creaked open the old barn door, unaware that their afternoon amid dusty relics would lead to an unimaginable journey. The rain drummed down on the tin roof, creating a symphony of sorrow that matched George's heavy heart. He looked around at their once vibrant farmstead, now a shadow of its former self. What used to be fields of gold and wheat was now overgrown and strewn with memories. The weight of unpaid bills loomed like a dark cloud, heavy and suffocating. Helen's gentle smile was the only light amidst her husband's worry. "Remember the laughter we shared during harvest time?" she whispered, brushing a hand across an old, rusted tractor. Her eyes sparkled with memories, pulling them both momentarily from their troubles. But as they rummaged through the barn, tossing aside broken tools and cobwebbed splendors, George's gaze fell upon an oddity, a wooden trapdoor partially hidden beneath layers of hay and dust. Excitement sparked in his chest. "What is this?" he mused. They pried it open, revealing a dark tunnel winding down into the shadows below. With tentative steps, they ventured into the tunnel's embrace. Every turn revealed artifacts from a long-lost past, tattered Civil War uniforms that seemed to sigh with tales untold, letters imbued with the laughter and sorrow of residents long gone, and remnants of a community once bursting with life. In their hearts, hope mingled with fear as they imagined what stories these relics held. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. They decided to host a gathering, excited to unveil their newfound treasures, believing this could rekindle community ties. Yet, as news spread, old rivalries flared. The Richards and the Callahans, once firm allies in laughter, now stood hostile, glaring over the items that stirred echoes of the past. "That belonged to my great-grandfather," shouted a tense voice, igniting a storm of conflict. It was as if the relics had ripped open old wounds, exposing festering grudges and unspoken grudgments. As George and Helen watched from the sidelines, uncertainty clasped at their hearts. Would these artifacts bring unity, or would they only deepen the fissures? In that moment, George's gaze fell upon a journal tucked within a chest, a weathered account from a local soldier, his cries etched in ink against the annex of time. The choice weighed heavily on them: profit or remembrance. They chose the latter, presenting it to the community armed with hope that it would bridge the divides. In the face of soaring tensions, the couple's financial struggles nagged at them. Yet, as the sun broke the gloom outside, so too did their determination. They were at a crossroads, poised to make a choice. Could they truly bring about healing, or were they risking everything to confront the ghosts of their past? As the gathering approached, anticipation mixed with dread. Hope flickered in their hearts, urging them forward. Could they ignite the courage in their neighbors to confront the burdens they carried? Would their community finally dig into their shared history, unearthing truths long buried? The answers lay just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. As George and Helen readied their home for the gathering, the air felt thick with tension. The faint memories of laughter and friendship danced like dust motes in the sunlight streaming through the kitchen window, just out of reach. George arranged the artifacts on a long table, each item telling a story of a life lived, a battle fought, a community once whole. He longed for connection, yet the tension from the neighboring families simmered like a pot about to boil over. "Do you think this will help?" Helen asked, her voice barely above a whisper, perhaps sensing his turmoil. "Maybe it will," George replied, though doubt shadowed his words. They had a responsibility to their past. Yet, what if the past only brought pain? As guests began to arrive, the atmosphere crackled. George felt his heart race. They greeted familiar faces, but all around him were whispers and sidelong glances, lingering like storm clouds. The Richards and the Callahans traded barbs, their bitter history gnawing at George's resolve. He noticed others standing back, avoiding the fray, drawn in by the whispers of curiosity rather than the desire for confrontation. But then someone stepped forward, Mabel, a woman whose kindness had always been a balm for the town's scars. Her presence was a beacon, and George felt a flicker of hope ignite. "This is about more than just artifacts," she began, her voice steady. "These treasures belong to all of us. They're a reminder of our shared roots, of a time we once stood together." The room fell silent, and for a moment, it felt as if Mabel's words stitched a fragile thread through the crowd. George shared the soldier's journal then, the one that weighed on his heart. He watched as Helen wiped her eyes, his own throat tightening, knowing this was more than a gathering. It was a reckoning. As pages turned, the laughter and sorrow echoed off the barn walls, filling the space with warmth. Mabel's voice narrated the soldiers' dreams and fears, the struggles that seemed timeless. Suddenly, the artifacts transformed from old relics into living testaments that questioned the very fabric of their shared identity. But even as the stories unraveled, tensions buzzed like electricity. George could feel the weight of shared pain in the air, lingering shadows creeping back into minds. "Why should we care?" a voice shouted from across the room. It was Jimmy Callahan, eyes sparking with defiance. "This doesn't change anything." Helen stepped forward, her usually gentle demeanor now fierce with conviction. "These moments remind us that we're all connected. Each of us has lost something. Our quarrels and grievances don't erase those losses. They magnify them." George's heart raced. His wife was speaking truths no one dared to confront. As voices rose and fell, something shifted. It was small, but change was in the air. Old grudges began to fracture, and George saw a flicker of understanding exchange between Jimmy and Mabel. Could it be? Was healing possible if they dared confront the wounds of the past? As discussions surged, another knock resonated through the barn, an unexpected interruption shaking the very core of the gathering. They turned, breath held, to see the silhouette of a stranger framed in the doorway. "What do you want?" Helen asked, her voice trembling but firm. "I know why you're here, and I have something to tell you," the stranger replied, stepping fully into the light with a long-forgotten face that had a story of its own to reveal. What had they stumbled upon now? And could this uninvited guest turn the tide of their already fragile night? The stranger's eyes scanned the room, locking onto faces steeped in curiosity and guarded anticipation. There was something oddly familiar about him, a ghost in the living room of their past. George leaned a little closer, squinting against the barn's golden light, trying to place the man's features. "Who are you?" George couldn't resist asking, his voice steady despite the wild thumping of his heart. "I'm Andy," he said, taking a step further into the barn. "I grew up here before the town fell apart." Gasps rippled through the crowd. George felt a wave of recognition wash over him. Andy had been a neighborhood kid, a little younger than them but always a part of their world. What brought him back now, after all these years? "I was told about the gathering," Andy continued, voice rising with urgency. "I have some stories, yes? But I also have something more important." He paused, searching the faces around him, like he was gauging their readiness. "Something that can help." "What do you mean?" Helen asked, confusion lacing her tone. "I found something," he said, "a tunnel that leads under the town." The room buzzed with murmured disbelief. "It's a forgotten remnant of our community, a vital connection, literally and metaphorically." "What sort of tunnel?" Jimmy Callahan sneered, crossing his arms. "What good is it? A bunch of dusty passages? Seems like a waste of time." But George watched as Helen's eyes widened, the gears in her mind visibly turning. "A tunnel," she echoed softly, and the possibilities began to dance through her expression. "If we could discover what lies down there," George said, feeling energy surge through him, "maybe it isn't just about the archives we hold onto but about the experiences and stories we've buried." Andy nodded emphatically, a flicker of hope igniting between them. "Exactly. I've seen glimpses of what's down there. Old remnants of how we once banded together. It could bring us back to a shared sense of identity we've forgotten." "Haven't we been down that road before?" someone muttered from the back, the skepticism hanging heavy in the air. But Mabel spoke up, her steady demeanor unwavering. What if this tunnel connects the past to our future? What if we can reclaim the essence of our community, not by fighting but by sharing our histories, what we truly lost? A ripple of murmurs rolled through the crowd. Several faces reflected hope, while others remained skeptical. George recognized that tension. It was a reminder of how fragile unity could be. He searched the room, trying to read emotions through the shifting glances. Mabel took a step forward, her presence anchoring the chaos. "Will you come with us? Will you explore these memories buried deep? We can't let fear dictate our journey any longer." George felt an overwhelming wave of determination. He turned to Andy, ready for whatever lay ahead, buried secrets and all. The murmurs grew louder, uncertainty mixed with the daring like a storm brewing. He could see people considering it an adventure to reclaim their past. "Let us do it," he said, his voice resonating with newfound clarity. "Let us understand our history before we can hope for a better tomorrow." Excitement coursed through the air as hands started to raise in agreement. But just as their spirits soared, the tension returned. "And what if we uncover things best left forgotten?" Jimmy's voice cut through sharply, a reminder of the dangers buried within their town. "Then we face them together," Helen replied fiercely. "We owe it to ourselves." As the crowd stirred with anticipation, George felt the tension snap. A sense of purpose united them, yet unease lingered like smoke. Could they truly confront their ghosts? The path seemed daunting. The shadows of their past awaited just beneath the surface. In a room crowded with unspoken stories, one question floated unresolved as they began to gather their courage. What would they discover when they unearthed the forgotten tunnel? The night held its breath, teetering on the edge of revelation. A heavy silence stretched across the barn, the weight of what lay ahead settling over them like a thick fog. George could feel the shivers of apprehension skate down his spine. Everyone was eager yet hesitant, their curiosity battling the lingering fear of what they might uncover. "I know it sounds surreal," Andy broke the stillness, his voice steadying the air around them, "but I stumbled upon this place while digging through overgrown weeds in my grandparents' yard. At first, I thought I was losing my mind. An old, rotting door leading to a tunnel? But the entrance is real. It's there." Helen moved closer to him, her eyes brighter than he had ever seen. "What's down there?" she asked in a hush. "Memories, maybe," he replied. "Old crates, forgotten furniture. But it's more than that. It's a piece of us." The crowd leaned in as if drawn by magnetism. Each person seemed to unite in this moment, bonded by the shared history of their once thriving town. The readiness to explore was palpable, but so was the lingering doubt in the back of George's mind. What if it opened old wounds? Who wants to go first? Mabel spoke, breaking the spell of uncertainty with her unwavering courage. An awkward silence blanketed the room, but the resolve that sprang from Mabel's challenge pushed a ripple of bravery through them. Slowly, a few hands shot up. George felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of something dynamic. "What if we went in pairs?" Helen proposed, her determination shining through. "That way, we can support one another. We need to be open-minded. Maybe we discover something we never anticipated." George met her gaze. She was right. Support would be essential in traversing the undocumented history beneath their feet. Exploring the underbelly of their town felt almost like a pilgrimage, a chance to confront old shadows together. "Okay," George said, his heart pounding a bit faster. "We'll meet at dawn. Bring flashlights and a few snacks. It's going to be an adventure." Suddenly, someone in the back yelled, "What if it's dangerous?" "Yeah, what if we get stuck or dash?" another voice chimed in. "We can't think like that," George argued, passion igniting his words. "What good is staying here, bound by old fears? Look where that's gotten us. Forgetting ourselves is not an option. We've been afraid too long." "Maybe we should leave the past buried if it hurts too much," Jimmy threw in, his skepticism lurking like an uninvited shadow. "But what if it's the opposite?" she countered. "What if we have to confront the hurt to find the healing? We won't know unless we take that first step." George could see her words weren't falling on deaf ears. A flicker of realization crossed the crowd, and more hands raised in silent acceptance. As the excitement began to outweigh the fear, he glanced around the barn, filled with familiar faces, some of hope, some of resignation, but all flowing toward the shared mission they had just ignited. The chatter grew louder as they began to plan logistics, shared laughter mixing with apprehension. Yet in their hearts, each one of them felt the powerful pull of their collective history drawing them toward the tunnels. But as daylight faded, tension coiled back into the air. Would they truly find what they were searching for, or awaken something that lay dormant and vengeful below? With those thoughts swirling like leaves on an autumn breeze, George realized he had stepped onto a precipice. Would the blurry outline of their past become a vivid picture, or would they wish they had left it undiscovered? At the edge of darkness, only the flickering light of resolve remained. What awaited them at dawn, adventure or catastrophe? The answers lay just beneath their feet. Dawn broke with a soft glow, illuminating the barn in buttery gold. George rubbed the sleep from his eyes, the excitement getting the better of him the night before. He could barely contain the rush of nerves and anticipation bubbling inside. The group assembled, clutching flashlights and backpacks filled with snacks, each person wearing expressions that blended fascination with apprehension. Ready? Mabel's voice rang with a mixture of enthusiasm and trepidation. More than ready, Andy answered, eyes sparkling under the light. George took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everyone's gaze on him. Let us remember why we're doing this. We're here to face the past together, he said, wishing he could silence the flutter of his heart. As they made their way toward Andy's grandparents' yard, the world felt fresh and alive. The air smelled of dew and pine. Yet a thick tension still hung around them, wrapping them in an invisible cocoon. What if nothing was waiting below? Or worse, what if they unleashed something that should have remained sealed? The questions lingered, but each determined stride toward the overgrown weeds dropped their doubts like discarded stones. There it was, the door, half buried in foliage, gnarled wood peeking through the brush. The sight sent a shiver coursing through George. There was a starkness to it that almost seemed to pulse with memories. Here we go, Helen said, gripping George's arm as they approached, emphasizing the need for camaraderie. With a nod, Andy pushed the door, creaking and groaning as it swung open. The darkness beyond felt alive, whispering secrets and echoes of long-gone laughter. It beckoned to them. Helen squeezed George's hand, her eyes wide and reflecting a mixture of fear and thrill. Who's first? Mabel asked. George's voice was barely a whisper. Let us light it up. One by one, flashlights flickered to life, beams cutting through the darkness and illuminating the brambly walls of the tunnel. It was damp but oddly inviting, like a long-forgotten secret that wished to be found. As they ventured deeper, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, filled with dust-laden artifacts. Crates from another era lined the walls, their labels faded but their importance looming large. Old photographs tacked to the walls showed families and gatherings, happier faces from a time lost. George could feel the air shift, the weight of countless memories packed into the stillness. Look at this, Helen breathed, pointing to a dusty trunk in the corner. With hesitant hands she lifted the lid, revealing mementos, letters tied with ribbon, a collection of trinkets, and faded journals filled with the scribbles of lives lived. The sunlight that dared to slice through a small opening above them sparkled on the fading paper, urging them to remember. As they dug deeper, excitement coursing through them, each person uncovered their own treasures of the past, stories linking them even further to their community. But there was another feeling stirring beneath the surface, the kind of unease that signals something is amiss. What is that? Someone shouted, drawing everyone's attention to a shadow creeping in the far corner, partially hidden by darkness. George sucked in his breath, their unity suddenly fracturing under the weight of uncertainty. It was a figure, indistinct at first, but as it moved, the whispers began again, carrying the weight of lost voices. Stay close. His voice trembled, every instinct warning him. With hearts thudding in unison, they turned their flashlights toward the figure, the flickering beams revealing a scene none of them expected. They were deep in the layers of their past, but what was waiting for them in the depths of this old tunnel? Prepare yourselves, George whispered, adrenaline coursing through him. Whatever this is, it's a part of us. Let's discover together. But out of the shadows, a chilling memory was rising, and they had still to uncover what it truly meant. Would this journey bring healing, or would they be trapped in the darkness they dared to explore? The flickering beam settled on the figure, revealing not a specter or ghost, but an old cardboard cutout. With big round eyes, it wore a cheerful smile, an advertisement from decades ago, meant to sell something lost to time. Tension ripped through the group, their quickened breaths mingling with laughter, boiling over into a mix of relief and embarrassment. It's just a weird decoration, Andy chuckled, stepping forward to sweat the dust off its surface. The atmosphere gradually shifted, breaking apart the heavy silence that had twisted in their hearts. Still, it felt creepy for a second, Mabel admitted, wiping her brow in relief. George let out a nervous laugh, but his pulse still throbbed in his ears. Yeah, maybe we needed that wake-up call. As they returned to rummaging through the artifacts, Helen's fingers brushed against something cold and metallic buried beneath a pile of dust. Pulling it free, she uncovered a tarnished locket that sparkled faintly in the light. It was a small, delicate piece adorned with intricate floral designs, but the clasp was tight, refusing to budge. "Hey, look at this!" she exclaimed, holding it up. The group hovered around her, captivated. "Do you think it contains a picture?" Andy asked, gazing at it with curiosity. "Maybe something even more personal," George suggested, sensing a deeper connection forming. "Let us find out." Helen studied the lock's mechanism, her brows furrowing in concentration. "If only I had a bit of oil or something." "I have my pocket knife," Andy offered eagerly, reaching into his bag. As Andy carefully worked the blade into the clasp, anticipation crackled in the air. The lock clicked open, revealing a faded photograph of an elderly couple, faces gazing lovingly at one another, time-worn yet full of emotion. The group fell into an almost reverent silence. "Look at how happy they seem," Mabel whispered, the weight of their lives palpable now in the stillness. "Wonder what their story was," Helen reflected, tracing her fingers gently across the picture. In this moment, they weren't just uncovering relics, but unearthing lives, dreams, friendships, and losses. Their own lives felt more intertwined with the past. This was a shared reality, not just a haunting whisper from an old barn beneath thick foliage. Suddenly, a thud echoed through the chamber. Everyone jumped, hearts racing again as they spun around, flashlights slicing through the darkness. "What was that?" George's voice quivered. Anxiety gripped each one of them, thoughts racing back to the shadow they'd spotted earlier. It came from over there. Helen pointed to a wooden crate that had shifted slightly by the wall. Slowly, they approached, eyes wide. With hesitant hands, George pried the crate open, heart pounding. The dust swirled around them, mingling with the weight of unspoken fears. Finally, the lid came free with a groan, revealing pieces of old furniture, perhaps remnants from a life lived here. But they weren't alone, not anymore. Something else stirred in the shadows, a presence closing in on them, pulling at the edges of their courage. George gulped. "We need to figure this out. Together." What secrets lay buried in this darkness? With trembling hands, they pressed forward, armed with flashlights and new resolve. They knew now they had awakened something important, but was it a blessing or a curse? In the dim light, something glinted as it emerged from the shadows, another object, something distinctively alive, and suddenly the air felt thicker. Whatever this new discovery was, it made the fine hairs on the back of George's neck stand up. They were on the brink of something more significant than any of them anticipated. "Look!" Mabel gasped, as they collectively turned. What waited for them in the heart of that forgotten tunnel could change everything. But how would it reshape their understanding of the past and their place in it? The glint caught everyone's eye, pulling them closer together. Mabel breathed a little faster, and there was a tremor in her voice. "What is it?" she whispered, as if the mere act of speaking would break some unspoken tension. George leaned in first. "It's a box?" The object was rectangular, nearly camouflaged by the dust surrounding it. He reached down, his fingers brushing against the cool metal, and he felt an odd mix of excitement and dread surge through him. It was heavy, More than just a simple container. Well, let us see what's inside, Helen encouraged, her voice shaking with anticipation. They all shared a glance, a silent agreement flooding the air with an electric charge. George crouched in front of the box, glancing up at his friends. Ready? With a nod from everyone, he opened it slowly, the rusted hinges creaking eerily. Mabel winced, but that flicker of fear quickly morphed into curiosity. Inside, they found an assortment of photographs much like the one in the locket, only these seemed to depict a life surrounding a house that had long since faded away. There were images of brightly pen-marked dates on the back, family gatherings, birthday parties, moments that spoke of laughter and shared joys. But amid the smiles, a few photographs caught Helen's eye, a couple standing apart, their faces etched with worry, shadows looming ominously behind them. Who are they? Mabel asked, her finger tracing over the image. It looks like they were always hiding something. George turned one of the photos over. This one says every storm passes, his brow furrowed deeper, each word feeling heavy, almost prophetic. What does that even mean? Andy said, the unease creeping back into his voice. As they continued to sift through the photographs, it became clear that these were not merely snapshots of a life filled with joy. Many of them captured moments stained with sorrow, hints of darkness hidden between the laughs. A dread washed over them, and the thrill of discovery began to take on a weight they hadn't anticipated. Look right here, Helen said, holding up a faded picture of an old wooden door. Its surface was worn, almost pleading. It's the same door from the house. I could tell just by the hinges. Suddenly, from the shadows, the heavy air thickened, vibrating with a sensation that sent their hearts racing again. Something shifted in the back, almost as if the past was pushing back against them. The group collectively stiffened, the laughter they had moments ago now replaced by a grave silence. Does anyone else feel that? Mabel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, Andy replied, his eyes scanning the surrounding room, searching for what should have been long gone. It's like something is watching us. The shadows seemed to swirl around them, thick and alive. They could almost feel old eyes scrutinizing their movements, seeking to protect secrets long buried. Helen suddenly stepped toward the door in the photograph. What if there's more? She urged. What if they wanted us to find this? Fueled by an impulse, she reached for the door they had initially overlooked, the one in the corner, hidden beneath old tarps and cobwebs. With shaking fingers, she tugged at the tarp, gasping as dust motes danced in the feeble light. Are you sure, Helen? George's voice shook even more now, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they had to know. I have to know, she firmly stated, determination lining her features. As she began to pry the door open, the old wood creaked like a chorus of long-forgotten voices rising up. What lay beyond that door? An escape, or perhaps something terrifying they were not ready to face. The deeper they went into the story of the couple in the photographs, the more entwined their own lives became with it. With one final push, the door swung wide open, and they were met with a darkness that felt both inviting and foreboding. Their hearts raced together, united in fear and curiosity. In that moment, they weren't just on the brink of discovery. They were confronting something that could change the very fabric of who they believed themselves to be. Are we really doing this? George ventured, uncertainty clouding his words. Helen looked back at him, her eyes bright with resolve. We can't turn back now. As they crossed the threshold into the unknown, they felt like explorers in a world forgotten, every step forward both a leap into adventure and a descent into the shadows of the past. What awaited them would not just uncover secrets left behind, but perhaps forge a connection deeper than blood, a tapestry woven through time that could redefine their understanding of family and love. The air inside the doorway was thick with an unfamiliar chill, hitting them like a wave as they stepped over the threshold. Helen squinted against the dimness, her heart racing. The darkness seemed to swallow the light. Hoisting herself up on her toes, she strained to see beyond the initial shadows. Is there even a light? Mabel whispered, finally breaking their silence, her voice tight with uncertainty. Wait, George said, fumbling in his pocket. He pulled out his phone, the bright screen illuminating the space just ahead. The beam caught surfaces both rough and old, revealing the outlines of walls that pressed in around them. As Helen raised her phone for a better view, the glint of something metallic caught her eye. "Over there," she directed, her voice steadier now. Mabel hurried closer, curiosity outweighing her fears. What they discovered was a narrow tunnel lined with dirt and stone, the ground uneven beneath their feet. Old roots twisted through the walls like fingers, reaching out for something they hadn't understood. "Do you think this leads to the house?" Andy asked, glancing at George. "Or somewhere else entirely?" Helen shook her head. "I don't know, but that door had to be here for a reason." An instinctive tug of adventure surged through the group, and they took a collective step deeper into the tunnel, the shadows growing thicker around them. Mabel peeked nervously over her shoulder. "So, what did we just walk into?" "I think," George paused, inhaling deeply, "the couple wanted us to find this. They might have hidden something down here, or maybe even something they wanted to share." Each step echoed as they moved cautiously, their shared breaths forming clouds in the chill. The path twisted and turned, the air growing more musty and stale. Mabel reached out to touch the wall, her fingers brushing against the rough texture. It felt like a lifeline connecting them to the past. Then, just as Helen was about to voice her own apprehension about the darkness, the tunnel opened up to a small chamber. The walls were covered in faded drawings, symbols that felt both alien and strangely familiar. "Look at this," Helen gasped, pointing at a figure that seemed to dance among the designs. "It looks like they were trying to tell a story. Or maybe it's a warning?" Andy murmured, tilting his head to get a better look. The realization sank into each of them: this chamber held secrets, perhaps expectations. But it was a history filled with both heart and heartache. As they marveled at the art, a creaking sound behind them sent a ripple of panic through the group. "What was that?" George's voice cut through the air, the warmth of their small circle replaced with urgency. They turned to see the door closing slowly, merging with the darkness they had just stepped away from. The light from George's phone flickered as the shadows danced menacingly along the walls. "Guys, we need to go back," Mabel said frantically, her voice echoing in the chamber. But something pulled at Helen, urging her to stay. "No, wait," she said, stepping closer to the paintings. "What if this leads to more? What if we can understand what the couple couldn't tell what they wanted us to know?" In that moment of indecision, a pulse of intensity rushed through them, an unspoken bond tightening the group. They were entangled in this past, drawn together by the mystery and perhaps something even deeper than they had anticipated. As they realized they were tightly woven into the very fabric of this story, a shared glance among them shifted everything. "Whatever is here," Helen whispered, her eyes fierce with determination, "we're in this together." Just as they began to turn back to the drawings, a hidden door within the chamber behind the drawings suddenly creaked open, revealing flickering light and a faint sound of music that seemed almost comforting yet strangely out of place. "What is that?" Andy asked, eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Helen exchanged a glance with George, feeling the resolve inside her stir again. "Are we ready for whatever comes next?" They stood poised at the threshold of the unknown, hearts pounding with anticipation and dread alike. In that moment, the true journey was just beginning. What lay ahead would unravel deeper layers than they could have ever imagined, challenging their perceptions and the bonds they held dear. "Let us find out," George said, gripping the flashlight tighter in his hand, their path illuminated ahead of them like a portal to the past. As they stepped toward the light, exhilaration washed over them like a wave. Would they find answers or face the ghosts that haunted the edges of their discovery? The flickering light ahead beckoned them forward, casting playful shadows on the walls around them. Helen felt her heart race with a mix of anxiety and excitement. "What if it's something amazing?" she whispered, glancing over her shoulder at the others. The echo of her own voice surprised her, a reminder of their solitude in the depths of this hidden place. As they stepped through the doorway, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The music fluttered around them like whispering ghosts, soft but insistent, an almost tangible presence that coaxed them further into the unknown. It felt beautifully out of place, a stark contrast to the damp earth and hard stone of the tunnel. "Do you hear that?" Mabel asked, stepping closer to Helen. Her eyes darted nervously, trying to peer into the light without moving from her spot. Yeah, Helen replied, and it's beautiful. The music seemed to wrap around them, filling the air like a warm embrace. They could see details coming into focus. An old gramophone stood in the corner, its brass horn glinting, surrounded by a scattering of dusty records. A few mismatched chairs sat crookedly around a rustic table, as if urgently waiting for friends who would never arrive. "Can you believe this?" George said, his voice full of awe as he swept his flashlight around the room. The light danced over the walls, revealing more artwork, faded portraits, memories of laughter frozen in time. "It's like we stumbled into a time capsule." Helen approached the gramophone, her fingers trembling as she brushed the dust away. "I wonder if it still works." She carefully placed the record on the turntable and, with a hesitant flick, pulled the crank. As the record began to spin, a soft, crackling melody emerged, filling the chamber with an unexpected vibrancy. They stood entranced, caught in a moment that felt both surreal and familiar. It transported them to another era, an echo of joy that seemed to pulse with life despite the decay around them. "I feel like we're intruding on something sacred," Mabel said softly, her voice nearly lost in the sweetness of the music. "Like we should be more respectful." Helen smiled at her friend, understanding but unyielding. "This place isn't just a tomb. It's part of a story. They wanted it to be found." Andy walked closer to the walls, tracing the artwork with his fingertips. "These drawings tell a story too, don't they? They reflect happiness but also loss." Helen's gaze flickered to the lyrics etched into an old wooden panel, which seemed to tell tales of love and hardship. A life lived fully, despite the challenges. Just as the last note of the melody faded, a sudden crackle resonated through the chamber. The gramophone stuttered while the atmosphere shifted, sending a chill skittering down Helen's spine. A tremor ran through the floor as if the very foundation of the hiding chamber was awakening. "Did the ground just shake?" George asked, a hint of panic in his voice. "Maybe it's trying to tell us something," Mabel whispered, eyes wide. "Or warn us out of nowhere." The drawings on the wall seemed to come alive, shimmering as if each stroke had a heartbeat. The symbols twisted and turned, and suddenly, a new figure emerged among them, eyes glaring fiercely as if demanding their attention. "What is that?" Helen gasped, stepping back involuntarily. "I think," Andy stammered, "we're not alone." The very walls began to vibrate, and the sensation gripped Helen with dread. As tension crackled in the air, they all instinctively huddled closer together. They were drawn deeper into this enigma, caught between the past and the present, each heartbeat echoing the urgency that surrounded them. "What do we do?" Mabel's voice trembled, blending fear and resolve. All eyes were on Helen, who felt a surge of courage rising within her. "We uncover the truth. Whatever it is. We can't turn back now." With determination etched on her face, she stepped forward, reaching toward the glowing figure that seemed to call out from the shadows, her heart racing anew. What awaited them next was veiled in uncertainty. Would they unearth the story buried in silence, or would it consume them whole? As the figure pulsated with light, an unsettling realization washed over them. Sometimes, knowing the past means confronting what lies beneath, and whether they were ever truly prepared for the truth remained to be seen. With a collective breath, they pressed onward into the unknown, ready to unravel the mystery that had been waiting for them all along. In the hushed calm of the chamber, anticipation crackled in the air like electricity. George felt the aura shift, vulnerable yet powerful. Whatever had connected them to this place, now they were willing to dive deeper, to unearth the intertwining threads of their history. Helen reached out first, her hand trembling slightly as it brushed the shimmering figure. It pulsed under her touch, shooting a wave of warmth through the air. "What if it's a bridge?" she murmured, almost to herself. "A way to connect everything we've lost with who we are now." With a shared nod, they stepped forward, weaving their way around the vibrant drawings that danced with meaning. Each symbol seemed to tell their own story. George suppressed the urge to look back over his shoulder, focusing instead on Helen, whose determination sparked encouragement in him. "Whatever this is," she steadied her voice, "we face it together. Right, Andy echoed, inching nearer, courage building in his chest. We're stronger as a group. The chambers continued to vibrate around them, almost as if the walls themselves could feel the weight of their decision. Yet as they approached the figure, its details became clearer. It was a family, one bound by love, determination, and resilience. The sense of familiarity felt like an invitation. Suddenly, the room darkened momentarily, plunging them into shadows, before bursting forth into an explosion of color and sound. Each brush stroke pulsed and shimmered, unfurling like petals of a flower. Laughter resonated, mingling with the emotional melodies they had heard earlier. At that moment, they felt memories rushing towards them, washing over their hearts, questions, fears, love, and longing intertwined. Listen! Mabel urged, eyes wide with wonder. They're telling us something. And then, as if the universe had conspired to reveal its secrets, ethereal voices began to emerge from the vibrant echoes. Stories woven together, messages of unity, love lost and found rippled through the air, forming a tapestry of connection that spanned generations. They lost so much, but they also gained strength, George realized, his own heart swelling with a profound understanding. He glanced around at the faces of his friends, eyes glistening, each reflecting understanding. As the energy within the space intensified, the weight of the stories tied them closer. Old resentments began to lift like thick fog in the morning sun. They were on the brink of embracing their shared humanity instead of being divided by grudges. A simmering hope ignited, fueled by the warmth of their shared history. It was about dwelling on the sorrows but gathering strength from the stories of their ancestors. This place had been a vessel for their memories, the shadows barely hinting at the light they needed to find. Let go of the anger, a voice soft yet commanding whispered through the chamber. It was Helen's voice, but layered with echoes from the past. Together, we can rewrite this story. In that moment, confidence surged through George. We all have our burdens, he declared, shaking off the remnants of past grievances. What if we celebrate what we are as a community instead of allowing the darkness to pull us apart? As they gazed into the shimmering figure, the visuals morphed, the family laughter blending with the chants of their present-day hopes. It was a call for unity, inviting all to step into the light of connection. With hearts pounding, they joined hands in a circle, sealing their pact. We choose to lift each other up, Mabel affirmed. This is about living, not just surviving. The sound of their voices swelled, wrapping around the room like an embrace, illuminating the artistry, the windows into their past that had lain in darkness for too long. As the vibrant figures pulsed brighter, George felt that burdens began to lift, old memories transformed into fuel for future strength. They had chosen not just to remember their past but to honor it, using every part of it to forge ahead. Everything we've uncovered has brought us here, Helen concluded, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks, reflecting the limitless warmth of their newfound bond. And like that, the chamber erupted with a dazzling light, illuminating the tunnel, radiating outwards a message of love, resilience, and strength echoing through the generations. As they stepped back into the familiar shadows of the tunnel, George felt the weight of fear wash away, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. They had discovered a connection not just to a history but to each other, transforming old pain into collective strength. As they emerged, sunlight bathed everything in gold, shining on their faces. With radiant smiles, they turned to one another, now intertwined through time, history, and unwavering hope. They had faced their shadows and found light, ready to heal and grow together. Let us share what we've found, George said, his voice steady. We need to bring this newfound unity back to the community. Until they could shine together, there was much work ahead, but together, they believed they could forge a future woven with threads of connection that were stronger than their past. As they walked back, hand in hand, laughter floated in the air, hope filled their hearts, and together they embraced the road ahead. So, dear friends, live with intention and embrace the connections. Who knows what transformative discoveries await you too? Now, don't wait not even one more second to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and comment your reactions and feelings about the ending. And you need to share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Only true fans understand how vital it is to support the channel through these actions.